Hello and welcome to Money Matters. Transport is the second largest source of carbon emissions in Hong Kong. The government has encouraged the transport sector to use more electric vehicles and to test new alternative energy sources like hydrogen fuel cells. Alice Khan reports on how Hong Kong's franchised bus companies are gearing up to deploy electric models, and one may become the first transport provider to use hydrogen fuel cells.
Every day, oil refineries emit carbon dioxide, producing gasoline and diesel for vehicles. Transport contributes 25% of all energy-related greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Here in Hong Kong, transport is the second largest source of carbon emissions, accounting for 18% of the total. To help reduce these greenhouse gases, the government has cooperated with Hong Kong's franchise bus companies to test hydrogen fuel cell models and to launch electric ones. Kenneth Leung, Assistant Director of the Environmental Protection Department, says hydrogen is a clean fuel.
When hydrogen, you put it in the fuel cell, it combines with oxygen molecule in the air and turn into water. It does not emit any carbon, and in fact, there's no carbon in the molecule itself.
China and Britain have already deployed hydrogen buses to cut CO2. Hong Kong's Bravo Transport, a franchise bus company, aims to operate a full fleet of 1,700 zero-emission buses by 2045. Yeah. 2 weeks ago, it introduced the world's first triaxle hydrogen fuel cell double-decker. Hydrogen is the lightest gas. It's also highly inflammable, explosive even. How can it be used to power a bus? The fuel cell is installed in the back.
Fuel cell simply can be described as an energy conversion device. It's an energy generation, and that fuel that we use is hydrogen. So as long as you provide hydrogen, combine that with oxygen in the air, you will get power.
The refilling time is only 10 minutes, and the driving range could be over 400 kilometers, similar to diesel buses. The hydrogen cylinders used to store the gas are installed below the seats of the bus. But the supplier of the gas cylinders says they're made of carbon fiber that is strong and safe.
We had a very strict regulation, and then there are a lot of safety tests to be performed, including the busting test, cycling test, fatigue test, and then the bonfire test, bully test, etc., as well as the job test.
The hydrogen buses will need to get government certification before going into service.
There's no related legislation on hydrogen fuel cell buses. Currently, there are some constraints of storage of hydrogen and also the transportation of hydrogen through the tunnel. So it takes time for the government department to study corresponding legislation.
Bravo says it's safe to take the gas through a tunnel.
Hydrogen is much lighter than the air. If there is leakage and ignition, the flame would fly very quickly and it will die down within 1 to 2 minutes.
A small concentration of hydrogen mixed up with oxygen will be ignited and have a fire hazard subsequently, and even explosion. And that is the dangers of using hydrogen in a confined space. However, if it's used in an open road, I don't see any additional danger.
Kenneth says the government will conduct a risk assessment during the trial phase in the next 2 to 3 years, before deciding whether hydrogen buses can be used safely through the tunnels.
If you run on the open road, you go through a very densely populated area. Will the fire hazard actually affect a certain number of people live nearby the road? Similarly, when you go through a tunnel, will there be fire hazards as well as explosion hazard that may damage the structure of the tunnel?
Franchise bus company KMB will also invest in new energy buses, but it will take a more prudent route to zero emissions and the use of hydrogen.
Almost all of the bus would include some journey in the tunnel, not only the cross-harbor tunnel. If hydrogen bus cannot go through the cross-harbor tunnel, there will be a detrimental impact into the operation.
Currently, the cost of hydrogen is 70 to 80 renminbi per kilogram, which is 2 to 3 times higher than diesel. That might lead to higher bus fares. Kenneth says the government will talk with hydrogen producers about prices and supply.
Some petroleum company already constructed hydrogen production plant in the GBA. They are talking about the annual production of 100,000 tons of hydrogen per year.
Lawrence Chung of the Hong Kong Productivity Council says there's already well-established hydrogen infrastructure.
50% of the tank gas composition, they are hydrogen. So if we are using the tank gas as a source of hydrogen, what we need to do is what we call decarbonize the tank gas and take out the 50% of hydrocarbon from the tank gas, and the result is pure hydrogen. Like for instance, a lot of the piping around us in our building, near our home, they are already giving us hydrogen.
This global oil company operates petrol stations in Hong Kong. It also operates 50 hydrogen filling stations around the world.
Are you going to offer more low-carbon emission products to your customer? In June, our airport station is going to offer EV charging facilities. And other than EV facilities, we are also exploring hydrogen, the feasibility of installing hydrogen facilities in Hong Kong.
Anne says the company would bring the technology to Hong Kong.
Shell has started operations at the 20 megawatts renewable power to hydrogen electrolyzer in Zhangjiakou, capable of producing 2,800 tons of green hydrogen. We also look forward to working with the government and different stakeholders. And we welcome any further carbon reduction policies and industry guidelines from the government.
Kenneth says the government must decide the amount of hydrogen that can be transported and stored in Hong Kong. He also says staff need to be trained to handle the gas. Deploying purely electric buses doesn't present such complications. In June, Bravo launched this $6 million electric double-decker.
And how long does it take to charge?
It would take about 3 hours to fully charge the battery.
These two big batteries, are they very powerful?
Yeah, we put the battery modules in these two areas in order to achieve the operation mileage for the Hong Kong Island during terrain. But you can see this area, we put the battery module over here. We sacrifice 11 sitting for these buses comparatively with the traditional diesel one.
The driving range of the E-double-decker is only 200 kilometers, shorter than its hydrogen cousin. Bravo has set up a charger in its central terminus to ensure the e-buses can complete their routes.
We run the buses during the off-peak hours. We can take these opportunities to top up the battery at terminus, and then the buses can return to passenger service for the evening peak.
KMB also pledged to have a full fleet of 4,000 zero-emission buses as soon as 2040. Currently, 30 electric single-deckers are running, and 52 electric double-deckers will arrive later this year.
What's so special about this battery?
So actually the capacity of the battery have improved. This new generation of electric bus is this hydraulic cooling system for the batteries. Overheating of batteries can hurt the safety. With this new cooling system, it can enhance the safety standard of these buses.
The onboard air conditioners eat through 40% of the electricity in the battery. KMB installed solar panels on top of the bus to provide power to the air conditioning system. Although KMB has taken a prudent approach to using hydrogen buses, Gary still thinks they should be included in the fleet.
Part of it should be electric buses, while part of it should be hydrogen buses. But the hydrogen buses probably should be for longer range buses.
Kenneth says government would start a trial program next year to test the different types of buses.
So next year, September, we plan to have at least 5 for each route. 5 hydrogen buses for each route, so 2 routes will be 10. Electric buses as well as conventional diesel buses at the same time on the same route, so that we can compare the performance between the 3 versions of buses. It will be tested on both Hong Kong Island as well as in the Kowloon as well as the New Territory side.
Both hydrogen and electric buses will be deployed.
Could we just schedule all those routes going through tunnel to be operated by e-bus? So we just have to design the system wisely to take advantage of the different fuel types offered to us. Hydrogen buses is much more powerful, should have the capacity to go going uphill smoothly.
Lawmaker Michael Teen says Hong Kong should subsidize the operation of electric buses.
The downtime, when you take everything into account, economically it's not feasible. So government needs to step in and provide some kind of incentive to encourage all the bus companies to switch over to electric on the short haul routes. I'm talking about day-to-day running of vehicles on a real-time, live basis, and then subsidizing each bus for whatever number of passengers they carry.
When we come back, influencers explain Hong Kong's property market, the Musk Twitter takeover saga, and the investment outlook in the second half of the year. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Matters. The local property market has managed to stumble through the pandemic with a mixed performance. Hopefully, when Hong Kong emerges from its COVID-19 malaise, analysts believe the fundamentals are going to push up sales. Our financial influencers comment on the best property stock in the local market, the latest on the Twitter Musk takeover drama, and the global investment outlook.
The pandemic continues to have a dampening influence on most aspects of the Hong Kong economy and on people's lives. The performance of the residential and commercial property market has been mixed for the last 2 years. Once the SAR begins to return to normalcy, the fundamentals of the property market will begin to emerge, as most shares are trading at depressed levels. But analyst Michael Wu at Morningstar says one share stands out from the pack.
All are trading on a meaningful discount to their respective fair values. For Shanghai properties, it's trading on price to book of 0.545 times, well below its 10-year historical of 0.7 times.
He says the company's high-quality investment properties in its Hong Kong and mainland portfolio supports its recurring income. The company's strong balance sheet supports the development of new projects. The dividend of around 5% represents good income return. Wu says investors have to be patient on the share price level, as stock price levels should come back once the border restrictions are eased internationally and at the crossings with China.
We believe that the downside is currently priced in. Really, the positive catalyst will be coming from the reopening of the borders. And that's going to benefit not only Shanghai properties, but the entire real estate sectors. Obviously, retail will benefit from a return of tourism, office from increased business activities, and people looking to stay permanently again in Hong Kong. That's going to drive housing demand, and that's going to be supportive of residential real estate.
Sung Hung Kai's real estate business is diversified across property types, so will benefit from the freer traffic across borders. Mobile, data, and car parking add to the healthy mix of assets, which are sure to improve with a recovering economy. But as we look ahead at what we hope will be a brighter post-pandemic future, there is a hawkish monetary outlook also on the horizon, as the Federal Reserve battles inflation in the U.S. economy.
As U.S. interest rate increase accelerates, we do expect HIBOR to continue to accelerate in the second half of this year and well into 2023. So what that means is that the cost of funds for banks will go up, and that should be reflected in mortgage rates gradually starting to head north. But again, that will be gradual. But we think, nevertheless, we do expect higher mortgage rates to be a headwind for residential property demand and prices in the near term.
Hong Kong's new government under Chief Executive John Lee has promised it will speed up the release of land to build more flats. But Wu says the release of more land to the market at a faster pace has been difficult to overcome for past administrations. Greater land supply for more affordable housing remains a long-term prospect for the market. Demand and prices should be resilient going forward. Elon Musk and Twitter are bracing for a legal fight after the billionaire abandoned its $44 billion bid for the social media company. Twitter responded with a lawsuit, saying Musk was obligated to go through with his takeover at the generous price offered. Musk's reason for pulling out is that Twitter allegedly failed to provide enough information about the number of fake accounts on its platform. Twitter has said for years in regulatory filings that it believes about 5% of the accounts on the platform are fake.
Now, if it's 5% or less, which Twitter's claimed, then ultimately they're proven right. Musk likely has to pay some punitive damages, including the breakup fee, and Twitter really ultimately wins in that situation. Problem is that if this starts to ultimately cascade and the Twitter bot issue is much bigger and that comes out in court, I think that really calls into question a lot of issues about the business model, monetization, and others. And that's why, from a Twitter board perspective, backs against the wall.
Musk agreed to a $1 billion breakup fee as part of the buyout agreement, though it appears Twitter is settling in for a legal fight to force the sale. Musk continued to use Twitter to taunt the company over what he has described as a lack of data.
Twitter legally could force a sale to go through. I think if you look at historically, likely it ends in some sort of settlement. But no doubt, I mean, Twitter is going to sharpen the knives going in. I mean, they've been scorned in terms of what's happened since April. They'll argue that they have provided the information is not a material breach. But that's why legally, this is almost going to be a separate situation than Twitter as a public company. The brand, employee issues, turnover.
Shares of Twitter slid more than 6% after Musk backed out. Analysts have questioned the reasons behind Musk's bid from the beginning. The size of the offer left analysts scratching their heads.
I think $54.20 a share was an egregious price. I mean, I think investors viewed that as almost hitting the lotto in terms of where the value of Twitter was. That's why there was no other bidder within miles of Musk. You know, we view fair value as $25 to $30 in terms of its peer group and growth. And I think that was always the disconnect from the beginning.
As Twitter's share price languishes in the $35 range, Musk has asked the courts to squash the lawsuit before it even starts. Analysts say it is unlikely Musk is playing for a better deal.
Skeptics will say that this is a renegotiation tactic. Ultimately, that they do come to some sort of negotiation. Musk could get Twitter lower. But that's going to be a long, arduous battle. I also know there's a lot of ill will right now between Musk and Twitter board. I don't see any champagne dinners anytime soon between the two. For Twitter, for Musk, I don't think there's any core winner here. And I think now this really needs to play out in terms of the courts to really end what's been a circus show since April.
How the second half unfolds in 2022 will depend on what happens in here and in other institutions like it around the world. Central banks in developed Western economies will be focused on fighting inflation in the next 6 months, and that will influence growth and the outlook for equities.
What you're looking for is companies which have either a strong brand name, who bring innovation, who have a specific technological ability, because those companies command and they dictate the prices at which they sell their goods to their clients. And the second criteria is to have companies which are self-funded. There's nothing like a strong cash flow generation in this environment, because if you have to come back to the market every 2 or 3 years to get the financing you need to be able to operate, the cost of your funding is going to go much higher.
The kings of cash flow are the world's mobile providers. These days, the best of the best companies for cash flow are the oil companies. A lot of consumer-related companies whose products are always needed by consumers enjoy good cash flow, especially high-end food makers. Also, balancing bonds against equities is no longer the reliable diversification plan that it once was.
So you need to find again something that diversifies you when equities tend to fall. And that is alternatives. That includes hedge funds, whether long-short hedge funds, whether macro hedge funds, which are doing fine on a year-to-date basis. They bring you some diversification. It can be private equity, it can be real estate, which not only bring you a better performance, but also some diversification in your portfolio.
Whenever you have political uncertainty, as we have in the world today, the impact is immediately felt on an investment portfolio. In that case, investors always have the old go-to safe haven.
For many, many years, we said gold isn't a hedge. Gold is probably the best hedge you can have against any political issue. Whenever you have political uncertainty, gold tends to move up. Right now, gold is being penalized by the strong US dollar, but we like gold as a hedge. Because it is a hedge, it is a limited amount that we want to put in a portfolio, maybe not more than 5%.
Researchers at London's Royal Botanical Gardens have long suspected one of their giant water lilies looked different. The trouble was they lacked an original specimen to help prove it was special. Previously, there were just two species of giant water lily, Victoria amazonica and Victoria cruziana. Now, after years of investigating, they've found a third, Victoria boliviana. Researchers believe the discovery is the first of its type in over a century. Specimens of the new species have been in Kew's herbarium for 177 years and in the National Herbarium of Bolivia for 3 decades. A few years ago, researchers from both institutions compared DNA samples that confirmed the plant was a new species. The Boliviana is most closely related to the Cruziana, but something caused them to evolve differently a million years ago. This time-lapse video shows how the plants grow at a tremendous rate.
So it grows in very fertile mud, but in a relatively deep water, so probably between 3 and 5 meters depth. And it grows on the edges of big rivers in the Bolivian Amazon, so in an area called the Mamoré River, which is a tributary of the Amazon. And because it needs very fertile soil to get so big, and it grows incredibly quickly, so it goes from the size of a pea-sized seed, about 1 centimeter across, and it becomes this monster.
The crowning glory of the plant is its beautiful flower that it uses to trap pollinators like beetles. Scientists say it's important to know what species a plant is to help us understand why they may have evolved differently from others. Kew says it's the only place in the world where you can see the 3 described species of giant water lilies side by side.
That's the show. Thanks for watching. Next time on Money Matters, the tribulations of travel during the pandemic. See you then. Good night.